job hosting. He recently had the Titans head coach Brian Callahan on. Can you tell there's been a bit of a PR push from the Titans organization? I got Rand and Callahan on Bussin'. I got Callahan on the Athletic Football Show. I got Callahan and Will Levis doing sit-down film sessions with Albert Breer and long-form interviews about the education of Will Levis. It appears there's a push to get the front-facing people of the Tennessee Titans, the new front-facing people of the Tennessee Titans, as they try and reorg in more ways than one, out in front of everybody who cares to read about quarterbacks, Brian Callahan, Will Levis, and all manner of other things.
They also seem to enjoy it, though. Like, I think Brian Callahan enjoys sitting down and talking football and talking about his plan and Will Levis and his dad working for him and all of those things.
Mike did the first year, too. So,
did he, though?
I'll see you week 7 next year. For a while. I mean, this is the fun part. What have they done that's garnered any real criticism? All they've done is spend all the money and get all the fun players and draft a quarterback and draft the Incredible Hulk to play left tackle and
definitely a honeymoon phase.
Bring in the it's all gravy, baby. It's the Photoshop picture of Rand hovering over the Nashville skyline with a rainbow in the background over the pedestrian bridge. Vibes are high. So yeah, it's okay. By the way, they should. They just spent all the last 6 years marketing themselves as Derrick Henry and Mike Vrabel, and then they bounced both of them this offseason. So, yeah, people need, if you're the Titans and you're trying to get people interested in your football team beyond just winning the games, you need to let people know who coaches and puts together and quarterbacks your football team now. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all. But there's a lot of that stuff out there. And in particular, this Breer article that we'll probably spend more time on tomorrow, but it speaks to the education of the quarterback and what Will Levis is tasked with here. We've been pretty clear on this, or at least I think I have. This is the make or break year for Will Levis as the Titans quarterback. I want to, by the end of season, 100% know whether this is a viable quarterback option or not. I have described it as not wanting to be Marioted again, and they avoided that because Tannehill was pretty seamless, and they could move on from Mariota, and they could have a peaceful transition of power, a rare enough thing to move from one quarterback to the next without really skipping a beat. For all the Tannehill hate, really did him a solid there. But now this is a different scenario. Will Levis was the beneficiary, I think, to an extent, of sitting behind Ryan Tannehill and for a period of time, Malik Willis. And then we all know how the story goes. Tannehill down in London with a high ankle sprain. Willis comes in, takes 4 sacks. Titans go on a bye after another loss, and Will Levis is the starting quarterback to the tune of 4 touchdown passes against the Atlanta Falcons in a home debut for the ages that people will still continue to talk about and continue to believe in. The reason he has the buy-in out the gate is because he came out slinging, and he killed it. And there's a lot to believe in there. But I was listening to this Athletic NFL show with Robert Mays and the Bills GM, Brandon Beane. They're talking a lot about the start of Josh Allen's career and the development of Josh Allen. Will Levis is not as raw as Josh was when he was drafted out of Wyoming. We can all agree upon this, yes? It's a much more refined player. It's a player coming out of pro-style system, player who's had NFL coaching, which is a plus. Had he not, maybe he is more Josh Allen, more bleep it Wyoming Josh Allen that you still see out there because he's got some of the physical attributes, even if he's not, I think Bomani Jones calls Josh Allen Dennis the Menace out there.
There are some similarities, the arm strength, maybe the accuracy question marks, but no question Levis came out more prepared playing with and against more NFL players, obviously, than Josh Allen, too.
Mm-hmm. And there was this line from Brandon Beane, Jackson, that I'd like the audience to hear from the Athletic NFL show. It's in the chat if you don't have it available. Okay, don't give me looks then if you have it.
You have such little trust in this man.
I don't trust either of you with anything, which is why it's important for the quarterback to have trust, because I know from personal experience what kind of working environment it can be when you don't trust what's around you. Let me hear from Brandon Beane.
Like anything, you're always looking. You always look back every year and you evaluate the year and you say, man, did I have enough depth here? Did I would say, one of the first lessons that I learned that I screwed up was when, for those teams drafting a rookie quarterback, I didn't have someone here with the right experience, veteran, for Josh to lean on. And early on, Josh was kind of struggling a little bit, going through his thing, and I realized it, and it was stupid of me to not have done it. But I got Derek Anderson in here around week 5 or 6, and I should have had that before. And I knew DA, like, you know what I mean? He did such great things for Cam, and it didn't just have to be DA. But there was some, we were looking at some young guys to give them a chance, but really we put all our assets into Josh Allen. I got too cute, and that's probably the first big I said to myself. But I've had many others that I've said to myself, and it's not going to stop. I'm my own worst critic.
The idea of not having that established veteran backup quarterback to help shepherd the young, super raw, super talented player in his first couple years in the NFL. Now, you pointed out to me this morning, Levis had that. Levis has had that time to sit behind and forced because of an injury. It was a thigh issue in the training camp practices against the Minnesota Vikings after the one preseason game in Chicago, and then the job was Malik Willis's as the backup until it wasn't. Well, I guess he always had the job as the backup because flip-flop situation. Either way. So Levis has had the benefit of that. But it's worth looking at the quarterback depth on the Titans roster. Mason Rudolph's played a lot of football. Support system in place. We've talked a lot about offensive line, skill position talent, coaching, and all manner of other things. But is Mason Rudolph the right kind of support system? And the clear and obvious answer to the support system that Will Levis, I still think, needs in place. It wasn't just Tannehill with Levis, right? Hopkins, whether he intended to or not, and it's not like Hopkins was not going to help Will Levis come along as a pro prospect or whatever, but he seemed to be a good foil, seems like the wrong word, but a good counterbalance, which I guess is the same thing as a foil.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, differing personalities.
To bounce off one another in a way that maybe you would with a veteran quarterback in a similar situation, but you want somebody who's also played the position, who's seen what you're going to have to see, who's got a fair amount of starts to their name, and certainly Mason Rudolph has that in his career, if not outright understand the system that you're getting ready to run. So Josh Allen took about, 3 years before we really thought, okay, this is sustainable, this is real. No question about the talent, but he's actually put it together in ways that make him the second most threatening quarterback in the NFL at any given point after Patrick Mahomes. Will Levis has a lot of the skill set that Josh Allen does, even if he doesn't have the same physical outright size and power to him. He still plays that kind of football. And you just, I think, want to make sure that you have somebody in that quarterback room who could also talk to him the way that Hopkins needed to in certain moments to kind of level him out a little bit and keep some of that raw emotion that you love, that gets you galvanized, that gets you fired up, but also, can keep you from doing something foolish in game, like, going for a third down conversion and getting helicoptered by a couple of Colts defenders.
Allen did not have Derek Anderson after his rookie year. Anderson came in 2018, and it's not like Anderson's coming in to help him learn the offense, right? If anything, Josh Allen is more ingrained in that offense than Anderson is, but about just the daily goings of being an NFL quarterback.
All like real life stuff.
Yeah,
beyond just the playing of the position.
And then
Mason Rudolph's not an old guy like Derek Anderson, I think a little longer in the tooth at the time.
For sure. And then Matt Barkley comes in, and he's Josh Allen's backup after that. And then at that point, Allen is established after year 3, and then you go forward. Pat Mahomes had Alex Smith, right? Like, you can go down the list of Lamar Jackson had Joe Flacco, similarly to Levis. Lamar didn't have to play right away. So Mason Rudolph is 28, Levis is 24. Mm-hmm. Mason Rudolph has thrown 458 NFL passes. Will Levis has thrown 255. So is that part of the design in bringing in Mason Rudolph? I don't know. I feel like it's more, and look at Brian Callahan's past experiences, right? He only has ever worked with a young quarterback starting his career once, and it was with Burrow. Mm-hmm. Like Peyton's a vet, Stafford, Carr, all veterans by the time Callahan gets there. You remember who Joe Burrow's backup was his rookie year?
Ooh.
Had to play a good bit.
What a question. Why do I want to say it was somebody that was around the Titans practice squad for some reason? I don't think that's right, though.
Former Arkansas quarterback, Brandon Allen.
Oh, my mind went to Ryan Mallett, and I knew that wasn't right.
No, rest in peace.
Yeah.
Brandon Allen, who also was 28 in 2020 when Joe Burrow was a rookie, was the backup to Burrow, obviously had to play after Burrow suffered that torn ACL. So that's the only sample size of a Brian Callahan, young, highly drafted quarterback with a backup, 28 years old. I don't know how much Joe Burrow was leaning on Brandon Allen just in terms of the week-to-week grind that is being an NFL quarterback. Brandon Allen's never been this high-level starter, right? Neither has Mason Rudolph. He's been a career backup. I feel like Brian Callahan serves that purpose for Will Levis. The receivers around Will Levis serve that purpose for him. Maybe Ryan Tannehill did. Just seeing that experience from kind of a distance last season.
For sure. And not even a distance. You're in the room with the guy. Even when you're hurt, you're in the room with the guy. And it's not like the whole mentor gate thing was so overblown because it's not like Tannehill's a jerk to these guys just because they're competing for his starting job. The same way that Joe Flacco wasn't a jerk to Lamar Jackson when he got ultimately benched for Lamar Jackson. Like, this is just the nature of competition. You want them to want to compete. So there's always that element. But I do think that you have Bo Hardigree, who's played the position. John Gall on YouTube points out, don't ignore the fact that the Bills had a defensive head coach, which does matter. And the Titans do have an offensive support system in place on the coaching staff that will help Will Levis further along, combined with the fact that he's going to be 25. Like, he's old for a second-year quarterback. He's older for a second-year quarterback than, Richardson is what, 21 at present? There's a significant difference between a 21-year-old and a 25-year-old. And I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson has any kind of maturity issues, or I'm not making any kind of assessment about Anthony Richardson's character. I don't know him, but I'm just saying, like, there are some developmental things that you don't necessarily have to handhold as much with a player that's been doing it and been in a couple of different situations and been with a bunch of different coaches and understands not only how to lead, but how to adapt, how to be fluid to his surroundings, because you have to be, especially if you're going to survive in the NFL. 615-737-1045 is the number. Since we're talking quarterbacks, I think it's worth taking a look at what's going on in the division, because not only did the Texans get a steal on arguably their top wide receiver yesterday, but there's a pretty good think piece on The Athletic about what's holding Trevor Lawrence back in the AFC South. And I think we'll dive into that coming up next. QC Kinetics is here to help you if you are struggling with nagging joint issues. If you're somebody who's not able to enjoy the summer as much as you want to because of joint pain, then QC Kinetics is for you. Don't suffer any longer. Non-surgical joint pain relief is here at QC Kinetics, so call them today. They're the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. I'm talking lasting joint pain relief with no surgery, no drugs, and no downtime. QC Kinetics advanced treatments harness your own body's ability to restore and repair damaged joint tissue. So you can walk, run, hike, play golf, move again, pain-free. QC Kinetics is under the leadership of former orthopedic surgeon Dr. Mitchell Shinecup, a true pioneer in regenerative medicine. Their advanced protocols have enabled tens of thousands of patients to reclaim their mobility. So stop putting it off. Take action now and live your best life again with QC Kinetics. 615-249-4024. That's 615-249-4024. So nobody likes it when your division rivals in the NFL get nice things. Now, only one of them recently has been the beneficiary of some nice things. Houston Texans seem like nothing can go wrong for them as of late, and not the least of which is the contract that they got Nico Collins on yesterday. Diana Rossini of The Athletic reported that Nico Collins, the wide receiver, who, I mean, we think of as a number one wide receiver in the NFL. Do we not?
Is he the number one receiver in Houston?
Yes.
Is he?
Yes.
Is he?
I mean, don't ask Stephon Diggs that. He'll give you a different answer. But yes, the answer is yes. I mean, if Tank Dell's healthy, Stephon Diggs is 3.
Really?
Yes. Oh, yeah. There's plenty of...
that sets up for a nice locker room environment.
Oh, yeah, no, he's going to be a pill. Like,
I'm sure that'll go very smoothly.
We talk about Vibes being good here in the offseason. Vibes are great there in the offseason. They're Super Bowl champions already with the Houston Texans. And rightfully so. They look the part.
I do not think the general neutral NFL public hears Nico Collins and thinks, yeah, bona fide number one wide receiver in the National Football League.
Then you're not watching him enough. And I'm not sitting here telling you that I'm grinding the tape and doing the X and O's, but I talk to plenty of people that do. I sit there on the Twitter threads and go through these film breakdowns.
I just think you
people
need more
Brett
than
Coleman
one season.
are so skilled with the ability to diagnose and dissect exactly the strengths and weaknesses of these players, their route craft. And Nico Collins is, I would argue, one of the most, if not the most, underrated wide receiver in football. They weren't a division winner just because C.J. Stroud was great. There's a lot of good pieces on that team, and Nico Collins is very much one of them. It's just taken him a little longer. So just because it's not a famous name does not mean that is not wide receiver one quality.
I just think you need more than one season of it, right? Like Michael Pittman has had a more productive career to this point than Nico Collins.
Sure.
Who's a better player right now?
Collins. I'm not doing their career. I'm doing recency bias. What I just saw last year, that's a number one wide receiver. And maybe something changes if Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator who interviewed for several head coaching jobs, including this one, goes somewhere and you see a significant drop-off. Maybe the league catches up to Houston this year and it looks a lot harder for Nico Collins and C.J. Stroud. All this is possible, but that's a number one wide receiver. So the idea that he got a 3-year, $72.75 million deal. Now, you get a max value of $75 million that includes $52 million guaranteed. Again, Diana Rossini first reporting that. It's a significant pay raise, of course, but 15 games, 80 receptions, 1,297 yards, 8 touchdowns. His 86.5 yards per game were the 7th highest in the NFL. That's a number one wide receiver, and the Houston Texans got a deal on him.
I think any one of those 3 guys could feasibly lead the Texans in receiving this season. Tank Dell, who had over 700 yards by the time he went out after 11 games. He was on pace to maybe outperform Nico Collins, who got a larger share of targets after Tank Dell went out injured after 11 games. So between Collins, Dell, and Diggs, you can make a case for any one of those guys to end up being quote-unquote wide receiver one based on numbers by the end of the season.
And they probably, much like what I expect this offense to look like, they probably will trade off who's leading them in receiving every given week. The point is to have multiple of them to make life harder, and Houston has the finances to do so because of the rookie quarterback deal that C.J. Stroud is currently on. Now, that's less interesting than what's going on in Jacksonville. And I'm so curious about them, not just because the Kickers got the lawsuit and the details are disgusting, as Lucas and I documented yesterday with Brandon McManus and the sexual misconduct allegations and lawsuit that he is currently in the middle of, and the litigation it could potentially open Jacksonville up to because of alcohol consumption on a team plane. There's that. But Trevor Lawrence, when he was coming out of Clemson, Lucas, from the day that he was the starting quarterback, I remember Trevor Lawrence being talked about as future number one overall draft pick. Best quarterback prospect since Luck, since Elway, mentioned in the same breath as 2 of, and I know Luck's not one of the greatest, but Andrew Luck very well could have been one of the best quarterbacks that we had seen as of late had he continued his career, if not due to injury. Don't have to relitigate that. Trevor Lawrence's ceiling, still incredibly high. 3 seasons in, what do we think is most holding Trevor Lawrence back? Because Greg and I have talked about this a lot on the podcast, and the Urban Meyer situation in his rookie year was nightmarish. Nobody was going to be successful in that kind of a setting where you have a historically bad head coach in the NFL with a prospect that is already coming in with all manner of hype in a quarterback draft that was complicated, to say the least. But there was never any question that it was Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he's the only first-round quarterback from the 2021 draft, still with his original team, after Zach Wilson was moved from the Jets to the Broncos. He's not the best quarterback in the AFC South. That's C.J. Stroud. So as we look at Trevor Lawrence heading into another season under Doug Peterson, who got better performance out of him, but it's still lacking in moments that are weird. And I know he missed time due to injury, and I know he played through injury. To his credit, that matters. But are we getting to the point with Trevor Lawrence where we're entering this Winston Mariota type of territory, where we're talking about Goff and Wentz as number 1 and number 2 overall picks, where we start thinking less about these guys as, and I don't know that Winston or Marcus, I mean, Marcus was an absolutely electric college football player, but we never talked about him as generational talent, best prospect since, all of the famous names that I just listed. Is Trevor Lawrence trending towards those 4 guys, or he's still an ascending player? Because I struggle to see it with him, and I'm having a hard time figuring it out.
Well, with 2 of those guys, Wentz and Mariota, injuries a massive factor that derailed their career. Not an issue really with Lawrence. He's been banged up at times like anybody else, but how many games? Do you know how many games he has missed in 3 seasons?
I'll pull it up for you if you give me a sec.
No, give me a guess.
You haven't?
Yeah.
I would imagine, because he should have missed time last year but didn't, I would imagine that out of how many possible? Do you know how many possible?
Whatever 17 times 3 is.
Okay.
Not including playoffs.
Yeah, well, you sense my fear trying to do that math live on air, too. I will say that Trevor Lawrence has appeared in
just how many
30
he missed?
games.
How many has he missed?
4 games.
The answer is 1.
He's only missed one game.
And it was last season.
Right. Dealing with injury.
Played in all 17 his rookie year, all 17 his second year, and then in 16 games last season. All right, so for me, that removes the Mariota and Wentz comparison. And then who are the others you had? Goff and Winston, correct?
Goff and Winston.
All right, so what held back Jared Goff the most, who, by the way, is having a resurgence and just signed a massive contract?
Many people would argue Jeff Fisher.
Sure. Okay. You can draw that parallel with Urban Meyer.
Many people, no.
In principle, Jeff Fisher obviously is a very accomplished NFL head coach. Urban Meyer is not that. But the biggest drawback against Trevor Lawrence his rookie year was indisputably
his
Urban
head
Meyer.
coach.
Indisputably. So, okay, let's talk about Jameis Winston then. What held back Jameis Winston the most? The talent obviously was always there, the athleticism, just straight up the decision-making.
Jameis would tell you his eyesight, but it's the decision-making.
So that's another parallel because we saw that become a bit of an issue for Trevor last year, really for the first time since post-Urban Meyer, because that wasn't a big issue his second year.
No.
He wasn't throwing double-digit interceptions in 2022.
Other than the first half of that playoff game against the Chargers, where the interceptions were plentiful, and then it took a Chargers collapse, unlike few others that I've seen in any postseason in any sport, that dramatic, where it turned so quickly on a dime. Trevor Lawrence has also been the byproduct of Calvin Ridley, for example. Calvin Ridley had 1,000 yards last year. He had 8 touchdowns receiving. He had a good season after not playing football for the better part of 2 years. Okay, Calvin Ridley also had significant drops in the first part of that season. They were not clean as an offense. I'm not pinning it on Calvin Ridley or anything like that, but there were some general kinks beyond just Lawrence. I don't think they were very good rushing attack the way that they intended to be. ETN has his usage. They've been trying to scale it back for the past 2 seasons, and all it does is keep going up. So they're trying to figure out the deployment of their running back situation as well. And now they're in an offseason circumstance where they have to figure out whether they want to pay this dude, which is why I say with Will Levis over and over and over again that I want to know by the end of the season, because I don't want to be in what Jacksonville situation.
Yeah.
If I'm a Titans fan,
You don't have a fifth-year option like Jacksonville does, which they picked up.
right? Your clock is even shorter than what the Jags are currently dealing with. So, and of course they should pick up Trevor Lawrence's. The result has not been bad. He is a solid player.
He has done in the last 2 seasons, in each of the last 2 seasons, he's done something that no quarterback in the history of the Titans era has ever done, and that's throw for over 4,000 yards.
The last 2 seasons have obviously been better since Urban Meyer was removed from the situation. His passer rating in that time, 95.2. It's tied for 9th best for whatever you make of passer rating. I know some people find it to be a flawed metric, but it's a metric. It did dip last year to 88.5, which was good for 21st in the league. And Randy Mueller of The Athletic wrote a really good piece on this, articulating a lot of the numbers. Again, the decision-making is a problem. And in particular, you can go back and find games against Denard Wilson's defense where Trevor Lawrence made some of the worst decisions of last season. Now, what similarities? You mentioned that you weren't going to draw comparisons between Wentz and Lawrence, right? Because of injury? What do Wentz and Lawrence very much have in common?
What's that?
Doug Peterson.
Oh, yes.
Very glaringly, obviously, the head coach, Doug Peterson, and Philadelphia's different, okay? But they ran that man out of town after they built him a statue.
Yeah, he also had Wentz as an MVP candidate before injuries piled up.
He sure did. And then it went downhill very quickly. And, apparently Wentz, the reporting around Wentz was that he was a bit of a pill and that he was going to ownership over the coach, and it got a little contentious. Like, there's a lot of details there on why that went south, and Lawrence does not. There's been nothing to that effect. He seems, if he could survive the Urban Meyer thing with a smile on his face, which he did for the most part, I don't think you have to worry about Trevor Lawrence being that. I just think that it is fascinating, and it is why that I refuse anymore to use the word generational around any player at any position, because they're just not. It's not. Not that it's not fair to Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence has to go out there and earn it, and he is an incredible talent. He deserves some level of expectation. Absolutely so. Geography matters, and Jacksonville has been a bit of a death pit for quarterbacks, famously, or just generally for football, other than a few seasons here or there, the odd Blake Bortles AFC Championship run.
I think that's more just about the talent, though. Not about, he's going to be a generational player. Like, there should be a baseline understanding that we don't know how these careers are going to pan out. But just in terms of the talent coming out with Lawrence, I mean, was it better than Luck? He was talked about as a better prospect coming out than Andrew Luck, right? I feel, and it may just be recency bias because he has been significantly more recent than Luck at Stanford, but I remember watching Trevor Lawrence, and again, untrained eye, thinking that is a higher level player in college than Luck was, even though Luck was a really good player. Now, Trevor Lawrence played at Clemson, Luck played at Stanford. It's not like Stanford was untalented. They were good football teams under Jim Harbaugh. They had players there. It's not like they were bereft of talent or what Stanford currently looks like. They had NFL coaches there when Luck was playing.
For sure. But, I mean, do you feel differently?
No, I think Trevor Lawrence was viewed as a better player, as the better prospect coming out of college, yes.
If you have, because it was 3 seasons of Trevor Lawrence being that guy, and everybody knew it, and generational prospect, to ask people to then immediately separate it from generational prospect, I don't think you can do that in sports. Maybe you can. I think it's wishful thinking.
A generational prospect is different from generational player.
How many people parse that, though, Lucas?
Sure. Fair enough.
And that's currently what he's the product of, because he has underperformed by any stretch of the imagination. He has been durable, to his credit. He has been a good soldier, so he deserves the benefit of the doubt. But I remember this. My first year in Nashville was Marcus Mariota's rookie year. I remember going through this entire saga from start to finish with Marcus and looking around and being like, all right, but this is happening with Marcus Mariota. This is why the performance looks the way that it was. And immediately just getting dragged by Titans fans being like, you're making excuses for him. Stop it. But to a certain extent, they were right. Because I call myself, I feel like, and there were a lot of excuses for Mariota. There were a lot of viable excuses for Mariota. And it got to the point where it was no longer tenable, and I felt like I'd been making excuses for him the entire time. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to join the conversation. Lucas has some SEC observations coming up next with the league, or I guess conference meetings currently going on. Hey guys, something that affects at least half of men, 50% of guys as we mature, erectile dysfunction. Nothing to freak out about, nothing to put off. If you've already waited too long, as I'm sure many people have, it's time to get it done and move forward with your sex life, and the Tennessee Men's Clinic is the place to do it. The reality is that pills often quit working, and guys start making excuses for not getting intimate. And I know that people hate visits to the doctor, but the Tennessee Men's Clinic is so specifically set up to help guys like you fix the problems that you need and get it done in a discreet and effective fashion. For a decade, the urologist and providers at the Tennessee Men's Clinic have helped guys with ED and weight loss, and they now even offer aesthetic enhancements and cosmetic procedures. Their ED and weight loss treatments truly change lives, and with no surgery, they are seeing success rates as high as 90%. They specialize in seeing guys who think they're out of luck, want to regain hope that they can be successful in the bedroom and beyond, and they even offer same or next day appointments. So call the Tennessee Men's Clinic at 615-208-9090. That's 615-208-9090, or go online to TennesseeMen'sClinic.com and book an appointment today.
Let's talk about spring meetings in Destin. Welcome back. Would you like to welcome the show back? Or we're off and running?
I'm just so unenthralled by Kalen DeBoer over the double. When we asked him for new production, and that is the level of effort that he put in after continuing to infiltrate this studio on a regular basis, I'm very unenthralled.
You asked for it. You received it.
Tell me what's happening.
And he's doing his best. Kalen DeBoer is at SEC spring meetings for the first time as an SEC head coach. This is weird. This is really the first time that a major SEC event is happening in the post-Nick Saban era. Mm-hmm. It kind of dawned on me when you and I were talking pre-show today. This is the first time that an actual official structured Southeastern Conference event is going on without the presence of Nick Saban, who obviously has a massive, massive voice in those rooms. So as Kalen DeBoer kind of tries to find that voice, some very important discussions obviously are happening in Destin right now with the news of revenue sharing in college football. And we fleshed it out a little bit on Friday, but it's not just that revenue sharing is coming, right? All of the offshoots that have to come of that, the discussions with schools and athletic departments and coaches about where that money is going, all sorts of things. One very key aspect of the conversation in Destin this week, roster limits. We know they're coming. And it seems like we're headed towards a world where there are no scholarship limits. Right now, obviously, that number is 85, but you can have as many players on your roster as you want. You can have 130 players, X amount of walk-ons, whatever you want. There are limits to how many you can travel and things like that. But, I mean, you haven't been to that many college football games. Like, did you happen to get a glance when you were at the Tennessee-Florida game, for example, a couple of years ago, to just glance down at the Tennessee sideline and just see
how many people?
I mean, compared to an NFL sideline.
I have noticed, I mean, you always notice on like TV and stuff like that, because obviously I watch college football and I'm well aware of how much bigger the rosters are and the coaching staffs are. But to see, like, because I know what a sideline looks like. I'm on a sideline every Sunday.
Right.
And the NFL has definitely pared it down a little bit to the people who are paying for the sideline access, but it is outrageous. And it's just all kinds of random people. It's not just the coaches and the players and the support staff and the equipment people. It's all kind of, people who got sideline passes for the day, or they know somebody who knows the athletic director, or whatever the case may be. You got Ramon and Slay running around down on the sideline, and by the way, they deserve to be on the sideline. But it's just, it is very chaotic. Yes.
And even if you took away all the recruits and people with sideline passes and media that get to be down there, it would still be an insane amount of people, because at home games, you can have 100 plus players dressed out, even if it's the coach's son or 30 or 40 walk-ons, whatever it might be. Anyway, big point of discussion today in Destin. Coaches in the SEC and probably across college football seem to hate where we are headed, and we hit on it a little bit Friday, and that is a world without walk-ons. And it's not just about not having the cool stories anymore, right? Not having the Baker Mayfield, the Stetson Bennett's, right? I mean, there's so many at every different point in college football history. There's a major player that started his career,
by the way,
as a walk-on.
I'm sorry, quick aside. Is Stetson Bennett playing football again?
We'll save it for NFL headlines coming up next hour.
That's such a weird story, sorry.
So, roster regulations seem to be coming. There seems to be a limit. Let's toss out, for example, the number 85, which is currently the scholarship limit. Let's say that with revenue sharing and all the guardrails that are going to come with it, they say you can have as many scholarships as you want, but your roster is limited to 85 players. Now, that would eliminate walk-ons, right? It would not make any sense to not utilize the unlimited scholarships and have players paying tuition that obviously are not worthy, so to speak, of a scholarship. So here are some quotes from SEC head coaches down in Destin. Oklahoma coach Brent Venables, get used to that, SEC head coach, said, quote, "We're going to expand the length of the season, so we're going to play more games, but we're going to have a smaller roster, ? Texas A&M head coach Mike Elko, "I am strongly against it. I think it's absolutely against what college football stands for, what it's about," citing, of course, legacy athletes not being able to play as walk-ons. Brief list moment there. He says it's something that's really bad for the sport. And Kirby Smart, obviously, who had a walk-on win back-to-back national titles playing quarterback, a former walk-on at least, said, quote, "I think it hurts high school football and football as a whole when kids can't keep dreaming about what they might be able to do if they don't get a scholarship opportunity." This is not just about taking away maybe what seems to be a pipe dream for a walk-on. Sure. And it's also about what Brent Venables is talking about, lengthening the season and limiting the roster. Again, another step towards what the NFL model kind of is. What's the key difference there? NFL can supplement. They can add to their roster throughout the course of the season. They can make trades. They can pick up free agents. College football does not have that ability with
Expanded practice squads post-COVID, all of it.
Exactly. So there's a lot here. You need some version of a practice squad, right? Like, in a lot of ways, the walk-ons are sort of like the practice squad, or maybe those depth guys that are on scholarship that are freshmen and sophomores are the scout team. You need it for depth. You need it for scout team, for preparation. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to limit your roster size and then have no means of addressing your roster throughout the course of a season. Because previously, you have those means, even if it means having walk-ons, it's still bodies that you can place in there. Tennessee was playing a walk-on at defensive back against Georgia last season. It's not ideal. You don't want to be in that place, but it was a body you could get in there by the name of Will Brooks. So that is seemingly where we are headed, and it is one of the many conversations, one of the many important conversations taking place in Destin this week. And this is going to be a long process of trying to figure out all the guardrails and specifics of this. But I think if enough coaches speak up as a part of this settlement, then we'll see some of those things getting tweaked as far as just leaving some room for flexibility with these football rosters.
Did you see Clark Lee's quote? The former walk-on, Clark Lee?
No, what
who's now coaching at his alma mater. Quote, what I've heard is, he's kind of saying what you just articulated about the guidelines. What I've heard is that everything that I've heard is not to be trusted. I think that all of the stuff is to be determined, and I want to know a little bit more about all of it. So they're unanimous, it sounds like, at SEC meetings about the presence of walk-ons. But to this point, which we'll talk about later, who's the loudest voice in the room? Who's the voice that matters most? Who is the person that has as much influence, one would argue, as the commissioner of the league in Greg Sankey? It's a fascinating world that SEC, the power vacuum in the SEC that has been created by the absence of Nick Saban. Do we know for sure that he's not there? Because he's still working in an advisory role in Tuscaloosa. I mean, he's not participating in the meetings or anything like that.
I don't know for sure, but I doubt Nick Saban is in Destin at the moment.
I don't know. 615-737-1045 is the number you need. That number to tell us what the dumbest thing in sports is right now for the opportunity to win what, Jackson? Yes?
What's up? Sorry, I was pulling something you asked for.
A 4-pack of Nashville SC tickets are on the line. If you have the best submission for the dumbest thing in sports this week, the number is 615-737-1045.
You see how he tried to take me out there? Because I asked him to do something during that segment, and then I ignored the fact that I asked him to do something during that segment, and then immediately asked him a question. Are you happy that doesn't happen to you anymore?
That was a lot. I got really confused by what you said.
Tom Pelissero reports that 2 Indianapolis Colts have been suspended under the league's gambling policy. I did
it. Poorly. Go to break.
It is 11 o'clock. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone studios. OTAs continuing today from Ascension St. Thomas Sports Park with the Titans on the practice field. Head coach Brian Callahan is scheduled to meet with media at 12:45. You can hear that presser live right here on The Zone. In Houston, the Texans and wide receiver Nico Collins have agreed to a 3-year extension worth over $72 million. That includes $52 million in guaranteed money. Collins is coming off a career year where he caught 80 passes for over 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
That's right. 615-737-1045 is the number. That's how you give us the dumbest thing in sports this week. For the opportunity to see Nashville SC play on Saturday, a family 4-pack can be yours if you give us the dumbest thing in sports this week. Quite a bit to pick from, coming off always a good holiday weekend to be able to pull the dumbest thing in sports, or many dumb things, out of. But in particular, I think we have some pretty good submissions here. Jackson, you want to start today?
Sure, I'll bat lead off. You like that? Little baseball reference?
Shut up and talk.
Okay. Have you seen this about the...
You like that shut up and talk? That's basically what you did.
Shut up and talk is actually an oxymoron. Good job on you. So, have you seen this about Justin Fields potentially returning kicks for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season?
I sure have.
So Jalen Warren, the running back, was doing some sort of event with Cam Hayward, and he was asked about it, and this is what the running back had to say. So, like, how is the backup quarterback going to be returning kicks? I don't know.
I mean, Taysom Hill was on kickoff.
But is Justin Fields a Taysom Hill type player? He's more athletic, probably.
Don't ask Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, Justin was asked about this, and he laughed it off. He was like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen."
Okay, bud. It is dumb.
It's Russell Wilson propaganda.
Russell Wilson? Oh, you think? Wait. I like that. Well, wait, quickly. We have a sound to signify reckless speculation. Thank you. So you would like to allege that Russell Wilson is spreading lies and rumors about Justin Fields returning kicks so that he can be undisputed QB1? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I like that. Have you seen... I'll go next, unless you want to go.
No, go for it.
Thank you for paying attention to the show. Have you seen this thing about Mark Davis and the 26-year-old girl?
No.
Okay, so Mark Davis, you know who Mark Davis is?
Owner of the Raiders.
Correct. So there is a 26-year-old Instagram influencer named Hayden Hopkins who was rumored to be expecting a child with Las Vegas Raiders owner Mark Davis. And there were erroneous reports, several irresponsible NFL social media accounts, of which we are becoming more and more familiar with. Dove Kleinman, who's out there doing some things. Did you see that somebody interviewed Dove Kleinman about the fake news stuff? Like they got the person on a Zoom that sold that account. Anyway, doesn't matter. So it's being reported by people like Dove Kleinman that aren't actually people on the internet that Mark Davis is getting ready to welcome a baby with Hayden Hopkins. There were pictures of her alongside the team owner at a game in 2022. And so then the reports were out there about him having a 26-year-old girlfriend who was with child. She's in fact pregnant with MLB player, Joey Gallo's baby. TMZ Sports has done the reporting, but the fake aggregator accounts in NFL media. Basically everything that Elon Musk has done to Twitter. Not that Twitter was a good place in the first place, or that Twitter was, any kind of beacon of light or hope in society, but just the idea that you cannot at any point, it seems, in today's age, get something that you reliably trust to be news, that you know to be certain from a news outlet or an outlet that is supposed to be news, even though it's gotten less and less newsy year over year over year. I don't want to have to chase down fake rumors about Mark Davis hooking up with a 26-year-old Instagram influencer. And the fact that the people are so quick to pick up and aggregate the aggregators who aren't even real people are my dumbest thing at sports this week.
It's a good one. Can we hear from Charles Barkley, Jackson Williams, from a few days ago?
You women out there, y'all petty, man. Hey, LeBron, you're 100% right on these girls hating on Caitlin Clark. Y'all petty, girls. I expect men to be petty because we're the most insecure group in the world.
Oh, you are.
Y'all should be thanking that girl for getting y'all ass private charters, all the money and visibility she bringing to the WNBA. Don't be petty like dudes. Listen, what she's accomplished, give her flowers. Stop being petty, all you women out there. She got y'all ass charters. She bringing all y'all this money to the table, but y'all being petty like dudes. LeBron, you 100% right. Y'all girls, stop being petty. Caitlin Clark, thank you for bringing all that money and shine to the WNBA.
So, that's Charles Barkley talking about Caitlin Clark and her haters, a lot of which are talked about as current WNBA players that have been taken to social media saying, hey, reality check is incoming. And I don't know if Charles Barkley was talking about Diana Taurasi in that clip, but Taurasi did have a quote with Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter a couple of weeks ago where she said, quote, look, SVP, reality is coming. There's levels to this thing, and that's just life. We all went through it. You see it on the NBA side, and you're going to see it on this side. You look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to be playing against grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time. She said, not saying her skills are not going to translate, because when you're great at what you do, you're just going to get better, but there is going to be a transition period where you're going to have to give yourself some grace as a rookie. I understand Caitlin Clark's impact on the WNBA, and it has been massive, and you could argue she is the best thing to happen to that league in the modern era, in its current iteration. But I don't understand why now she is just immune from vets in the WNBA. Like, do they now have to kiss her feet and bow down and say, thank you, Caitlin Clark, for coming into our league? I don't see a big problem with the likes of Diana Taurasi saying, hey, great that you're here, but like, get ready because this is the pros. Like every other league does this, right? When it's a high-profile rookie coming in.
What's happening with Caleb Williams right now? People cannot wait to tee off on that dude.
Every rookie has some sort of reality check when they get to the next level. So while, yes, Caitlin Clark has a massive impact, a positive impact on the WNBA, why is it such a bad thing for veterans to kind of be like, hey, just so you know, like, we're not going to kiss your feet when we're sharing the court with you. Like, this is going to be an adjustment. Now you're playing against the best of the best in women's basketball. I don't see the problem with that. Like, why do those people become Caitlin Clark haters that they should be thanking her and giving her flowers for gracing the league with her presence? Like, she has a great impact, but why do they have to do that is my question.
Do you think, and I don't know if I'm getting too deep here, but do you think that there is a level of discomfort or just general lack of know-how from commentators in covering this kind of a star in women's sport? You think, and of course, we as an all-male cast on a 3-hour radio show are very ill-equipped to talk about this as well, but just generally the approach. Like LeBron James and Charles Barkley are taking up for Caitlin Clark. That's fine. People take up for LeBron James. Far more people drag LeBron James. People take up for Charles Barkley all the time. Plenty of people have gone at Barkley over the course of his career. I would think that the two of them understand that better than anybody, that the competitor wants that. That Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese or Camila Cardoso or any of these high-level now professional athletes relish the opportunity to have motivation. And I wonder if there's not some kind of like something about guys talking about women's basketball this much where they've not really had to before or not been asked to before, where it's not been that much a part of the public discourse like it is right now in the present day. I wonder if there's not some kind of innate sense of Charles Barkley feels like he needs to stick up for Caitlin Clark. And really, you don't. She's a grown woman. She can handle herself. She had a career high 30 last night. The Fever still lost, but like she's figuring it out. It's not like this is some damsel in distress is almost what it feels like a little bit. And I just don't, and I think that's something that I'm kind of curious to see how guys who are tasked with talking about women's basketball, who aren't normally talking about women's basketball on the First Take debate desk and all on our show. We didn't do a ton of college or women's college basketball before Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and all this, unless Kim Mulkey said something dumb. So it's pretty interesting.
And I don't know if Charles is talking about Diana's comments, but a lot of people,
not specifically.
A lot of people took
generally.
A lot of people took Diana's comments though as, "Oh, be appreciative. Look what she's doing for your." Like, that's fine. You can be appreciative, but I would think Caitlin would appreciate one of the greatest women's basketball players of all time, college and pro, telling her, "Listen, like it's not the same here, and there is an adjustment." She's averaging 17 points per game. She never averaged less than 26 points per game in a season at Iowa.
Yeah.
So the adjustment's already happening, and you just said she put up 30, a career high, in a losing effort. She's on a bad team. They had the number one pick for a reason. So, yeah, I don't see a massive problem with WNBA vets letting Caitlin know, hey, it's not going to be like it was when you were in college, while simultaneously acknowledging that she is making a massive impact to the league. Cole on the FNM Bank chat makes a good point. She hasn't even had an offseason.
It is weird how they go right from the college basketball season to the pro season.
But like, look at Diana Taurasi's numbers her rookie year and the jump she took in her second year. And she was the best player in the sport when she was in college. So, I don't think that telling Caitlin Clark that things are going to be different in the pros makes you a Caitlin Clark hater.
Your opportunity to win a family 4-pack to Nashville SC's upcoming game on Saturday, 615-737-1045. All you have to do is give us the dumbest thing in sports, coming up next. So you're talking about Caitlin Clark and her haters and things like that. Welcome back to the show. We're fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. We'll get to your phone calls on the dumbest thing in sports in just a little bit. 615-737-1045 is how you join. Did you see the thing with her and Angel Reese after the Sky beat the Indiana Fever? Angel had like 13-9, had a pretty good game. She gets on Twitter and says, and that's on getting a win in a packed area. I think she meant arena. Not just because of one player on our charter flight. So that's Angel Reese, and people obviously take it as shade. And, oh, my God, she does hate Caitlin Clark. She was lying when she said she didn't hate Caitlin Clark in college and the not just competitors, whatever. So Angel Reese deletes the tweet. Her mother gets on social media, which is always a good thing in these kind of situations.
Never goes poorly.
From a private account and tweets, she was not attacking, talking about Angel, she was not attacking CC, but because you and the rest of those children of the corn folks thought she was, and once again sending her racist and vile comment, she did. Her comment was directed towards the media, but of course you're about clicks. Because I only bring this up because somebody in the YouTube comments, Harold Haywood says, Angel Reese mom calling Clark fans children of the corn is totally unacceptable. I think it's one of the funniest things in the world. I think they should make t-shirts.
Chef Ran of the F&M Bank chat says, low-key, Angel and Caitlin are the Larry and Magic of the WNBA. Enjoy it. It's making us actually watch the sport.
Are people, surely to God, people are not offended about Indiana Fever fans being called children of the corn. Like, the level of sensitivity, just generally, in good-natured ribbing in sports, just because one person's on social media and you can go after them about it. Like, if you're bothered by being called children of the corn, you're the problem, not Angel Reese and her mother. Anyway, 615-737-1045 is the number. Tell us what the dumbest thing in sports this week is. We'll send you a family 4-pack of Nashville SC tickets for Saturday's game at Geodis Park. Start with Mike, who's in sales. Hey, Mike. Guess we won't start with Mike. How about Lee, who's a landscaper?
Yeah. What's up, guys? So my dumbest thing in sports was, without a doubt, we went to the SEC tournament and went to the South Carolina game. So I'm sitting there with my sons. I got 3 boys, my wife. And we've been out there for about 4 hours. And then basically blankety blank just was insane. And for 30 minutes, it took them to figure out what to call and what the actual issue was. And the craziest part was, so they're not allowed to challenge that, correct? So Messina, as he's coming home, we're right behind the catcher. As he's coming home or coming back from first base, runs up to his coach and says, something obviously that the catcher balked. And the coach came out, talked to the ump, and then they looked at the review of it, and they challenged it, which they couldn't even do. They weren't even allowed to do at the time. So then LSU does a formal protest against all of this, and come to find out we can't protest it because it's a non-protesting thing as well. So it was just 30 minutes of bullcrap and booing LSU fans.
Just wasted time.
I had a ball with it. It was fun, but, man, it was horrible at the same time.
Thank you for the call. We'll put you on hold, Lee, and give you the opportunity to win some tickets.
That game was nuts, too, that South Carolina LSU game.
Josh works for Yazoo.
What's going on, y'all?
Yo.
Man, that Mark Davis one, that one's pretty rough, I'll be honest. That gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Well, the fact that it's not true, though, it's you just have aggregators on social media out here running wild with the 60-plus-year-old owner of an NFL team, which I guess is not unfeasible, knocking up a 26-year-old Instagram influencer.
Yeah, it's a lose-lose. They're spreading it, which is horrible, and then if it is true, it's also horrible.
It's tough. What do you got?
Man, I live out here in Clarksville, born and raised, and we got an absolute institution of our community out here about to get trampled on. It's Mason Rudolph Golf Course. Not to be named after the new Titans quarterback, but named after one of the greatest golfers Tennessee's ever seen. 5 PGA wins back in the 50s up into the 70s. 5-time Tennessee State Open champion. Won first as an amateur back in the 50s. And this golf course has been open since 1913, 111 years.
Is this in Clarksville, Josh? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, in
okay,
Clarksville.
For sure. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. And it got named after Mason in 1963, so 61 years being named after him. And all of a sudden, the city is going to close it down. They gave us a 1.5-week notice And they said on June 1st it's going to become a park. Didn't tell anybody. Nobody even got to, vote on it or nothing. And, and they're going to turn it into a park. And they've already ordered a sign from Kentucky. They couldn't even have a park sign made locally here. I mean, it's like somebody already spotted it in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, painted and done. They've already paid for it, didn't even ask us about it. And this place has been a golf course for 111 years, named after one of the greatest Tennessee athletes that people really don't even know. Mason Rudolph was probably the best athlete to come out of Clarksville, other than Wilma Rudolph herself, Trenton Hassel, and some others. And another really cool one is Alec Mills, who y'all have had on, 104.5. The dude literally worked this golf course when he was in high school playing baseball, and then he goes on to work, play for the Cubs and throw a no-hitter. This place is a staple in our community, and we got no heads up whatsoever, and they're just going to turn it into a park, even though there's already 13 parks within a 5-mile radius.
Thanks for the call, Josh. Yeah, I'm looking at the article now. Do you know anything about this?
No.
Look at the article now on ClarksvilleNow.com. So, 1 week after announcing that Mason Rudolph Golf Course will close at the end of the month and be converted into a multi-use park, Mayor Joe Pitts announced Tuesday that the city is reconsidering. Okay, so apparently Josh and everybody else who's pissed about the golf course plans, or just basically the lack of information, it would seem, for the public about their plans for the golf course. Quote, since our recent announcement of a plan to convert Mason Rudolph Golf Course to a public park that would be called Mason Rudolph Legacy Park, we have heard from many Clarksville residents, casually and informally, who have widely different points of view on this concept. There are many of our residents who are for the park proposal, but we are also hearing from many who want it to remain as a golf course. So apparently they're going to keep gathering information in the coming weeks before making a decision. And the logic is that the course is kind of damaged, is the word that they use in the article, and the use has been diminished over the course of time, which is why they're thinking about making the change. So, it's always divisive when these things get into local landmarks, and for good reason. Mason Rudolph Golf Course sounds like it's one in Clarksville. Thanks for the call. John in Logistics up next.
What's up, guys? My dumbest thing in sports this week is the NCAA. I have no problem with paying players. I do, however, have a problem with the way the NCAA has agreed to pay the settlement with the P5. The way that they have agreed to this settlement is that they are going to have the G5 schools and the rest of the FBS and smaller schools pay 60% of the agreement. So the Power 5 schools, the schools that already have all the money, are fine. But the schools who are already struggling are going to have to pay 60% of the NCAA's buyout.
That's brutal. Thanks for the call, John.
We've talked about the way it just continues to widen the gap. But look, this was an agreement struck too with Power 5 conferences. So they're going to do what benefits them, and that gap's just going to continue to widen. And at some point, we're probably already past that point, they're not playing the same sport. Like, they're in the same league, but they're not. They're playing for the same championship, quote unquote, but they're not. And they haven't for quite some time.
Well, yeah, but we've always kind of known that. It's just kind of inferred. But when you actually put the squeeze on these programs, the way that some of these policies and settlements and things like that will, just even something as simple as we talked about the coach to quarterback communication and the tablets on the sideline that teams will be able to use for the first time in college football. Who's giving MTSU, or I don't know, I don't think Tulane's like super hard up, but like I don't know what Tulane's budget is and how much.
Can Bowling Green afford
Bowling
the
Green probably a better
communication,
example.
Right?
Still, even Western, like programs like that may not have accounted for that in their athletic department budget, and Western and MTSU are probably bigger than I should be referencing. But still, it's a tough spot for a lot of these group of five and fringe D1 programs just in athletics up and down. All right, last one. Rhett is a truck driver up next.
Yes, sir. Hey, thanks for taking the call. Real quick, don't be upset with me. I know it's a little dated, but Indiana, they blew it. They shouldn't have beat Boston in the series in general, but, man, they really let one go. They could have put Boston in a real bad position. And maybe you don't want to talk about that. I get that, but thought it was worth saying. You all have a good day.
Hey, thanks for the call. No, I mean, listen, you did you catch the end of that elimination game?
I know Rick Carlisle's gotten a lot of criticism.
He should get a lot of criticism. The game one is as mangled the end of a game in a critical decision that I have seen from a coach at any level in quite some time. To play that game to overtime, to have it be tightly contested the entirety of the time, and to just not be able to understand the timeouts. And it's not like he may have just had a brain fart. Like Rick Carlisle is an above average coach. He's had a long and successful career. He's won a championship to his credit. But yeah, that was brutal. And to have it just peter out in a sweep. So the highlight of the Indiana Pacers season is basically being on the sideline of Caitlin Clark's game last night at Gainbridge Fieldhouse Arena. Tough. All right. Lee or Josh, who's getting the tickets?
I say Josh with the golf course stuff. I'd be pissed too if I was a Clarksville resident and that golf course meant something to me like it seems to with Josh.
I was going to go Lee, so you're the tiebreaker.
Making me the bad guy. Worse of a person than I already am, are we?
So umpires in Hoover at the SEC tournament or the golf course in Clarksville seemingly almost getting taken away.
I mean, the situation in Hoover sounds ridiculous.
It does.
And I don't know the timeline that the city actually, I'm not familiar with all the facts on the golf course situation, but it sounds like Josh is not the only one who's perturbed about this and as well within their right to be. That's tough. I'll go Lee.
Lee, you're going to the Nashville SC game on Saturday against New England Revolution. See you there.
We appreciate you guys, as always, for the dumbest thing in sports. Always bring your submissions Wednesday at this time. We will have prizes for you. Maybe Nashville SC tickets, maybe Hattie B's Feed Your Flock. Who's to say? In fact, why don't we do this? Why don't we give Josh the Hattie B's package? Can we do that? Because those are both two good submissions, and I hate to have to pick between the two, and they're both good prizes. So stay on hold, Josh, and Jackson will be with you shortly.
Taylor in the F&M Bank chat says, at Buck and at Lucas just picked up the chicken and waffle stack from the Hattie B's in Franklin. Oh my God.
I'm saying, like, it changed my life. The Hattie B's hot chicken and waffles at the factory in Franklin changed my life. It's the only place that you can go for Hattie B's breakfast menu. They open at 7 a.m. if you're so inclined. So, speaking of things that are Southern, not just hot chicken, but SEC meetings going on in Destin. The first time that such a meeting has occurred in the better part of 2 decades without Nick Saban as head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, there's a bunch of different issues at hand that they are currently meeting on and voting on, continuing to discuss potential legislation or conference legislation that they're going to have to implement and how they're going to protect things like walk-ons and roster sizes and all these different things as they prepare for conference realignment and having parties really participate in Texas and Oklahoma in these discussions for the first time. Without Nick Saban, there's a void. There's a power vacuum. Nick Saban's opinion and voice and insights mean more than everybody else in that room. I would argue, Lucas, and you can check me if you think I've gone too far, but I would argue that he is as important, if not more important, than Greg Sankey on the direction of collegiate, not just football, but collegiate athletics in the way that he speaks on things in the modern age, on the impact that his words have on other people in the room, including Sankey. Maybe I've gone too far by saying that he is more powerful than the conference commissioner, who is the most powerful conference commissioner in all of collegiate athletics. But I just think he's had such a platform for such a long time, and he's more out front than Greg Sankey is on a regular basis, that it's hard for me to not look at him as a bigger figure in the landscape of not just football, but collegiate athletics as a whole.
Not more powerful in that he has the avenues to accomplish things that Greg Sankey does.
Sure.
Obviously. But in terms of his voice and his impact on the conference, yeah, absolutely I would hear that. More people know who Nick Saban is, and more people will listen to Nick Saban's thoughts on something. And Greg Sankey is a smart man. Greg Sankey knows that as well.
Who steps in the absence of Nick Saban? Because it's not like there has to be one ringleader just because there has been one ringleader. And we can pretty well agree, though Nick Saban, I think, has always been respectful of his colleagues, and many of them he has great working relationships with as former former coordinators or assistants or what have you working under Saban in any number of stops. Kirby is who people are going to default to. Is Kirby that person? Because I don't think of Kirby Smart as being on the forefront of everything that's going on in collegiate athletics and having the loudest voice in the room on things specific to football. He's asked a lot of things about this. He's a two-time national champion in a super powerful program that figures to be right back in the mix for the college football national championship again. But is he the kind of person to really dig in on stuff like this? I don't know. I'm genuinely asking the question. I'm looking forward to see. It's not Lane Kiffin, is it?
I think back to, believe it was after Georgia's second of the back-to-back national titles under Kirby Smart, and he had a sit-down interview with, I'm pretty sure, Reese Davis. And this was like one day after the national championship game when Georgia dusted TCU. And Kirby went on at length about the current demands of the sport on its coaches, assistant coaches primarily, and just how untenable and unsustainable that situation is. Speaking from experience, too, Kirby Smart lost a very good offensive line coach in Matt Luke due to the rigors of coaching in college football. So I know Josh Pate uses this all the time, like, because people are very quick to, well, you make millions, that's why you make millions. Josh has said this, that no matter how much more money you make, it doesn't give you more hours in the day. And there is no question that, okay, if you don't want to feel bad for the head coach that's making millions, that's fine. But that trickles down to the assistants. It trickles down to people in the recruiting offense, to GAs that are getting paid next to nothing. There are a lot of hands in there in an athletic department and in a football program. So I think back to that interview that Kirby did, laying out how things just need to change. And I do think Kirby is that voice now in the SEC. Harold on the FNM Bing chat says it probably should be Brian Kelly, but he feels a little sleazy.
Brian Kelly hasn't been in the SEC long enough to
right.
to run that room, even if Brian Kelly, carries himself in a way that would, Brian Kelly's probably going to have some loud opinions.
It's absolutely Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is the man in charge, so to speak, among the SEC head coaches, and I don't really know who is second right now. Like, I have no idea. Just like on the football field, I don't know who's going to take up that mantle. We've talked about it. If not for Nick Saban in Alabama, you could argue that Georgia has 4 national titles under Kirby right now. Like, that was the roadblock they kept running into before they finally broke through. And even after they broke through, they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship. And so... and it happened again last year, and they eliminated Georgia from the playoff. I don't know who that roadblock is going to be on the field at this point. Texas is a good candidate with what they have coming back and Steve Sarkisian, but it's their first year in the league. I don't know. How much more rising does Tennessee have to do to get into that conversation? How good does Nico Iamaleava have to be for Tennessee to get into that conversation as just a roadblock in front of Georgia to not allow them to steamroll the rest of the conference with Saban out of the door? Alabama could still be in that discussion with Kalen DeBoer, but in terms of the voice outside of the football field, I don't know who is behind Kirby Smart right now. I have no idea. You can make the case for a few guys in the conference right now. I think you can make the case for Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly wants his voice to be heard.
Sure. And yes, he's fairly new to the conference, but he's also the winningest head coach in Notre Dame history, which right? Matters. That he's been to playoffs. So I would probably right now say that that's Brian Kelly behind Kirby Smart in terms of who you're going to listen to about how things are happening and where things are trending in college football right now.
There's a difference between, which is my point, there's a difference between listening and acting on what it is that the messenger is trying to deliver. And I don't know that people hear Brian Kelly. I don't know if they're actually listening to Brian Kelly, unless he screws up and gets, publicly embarrassed, because people like to drag Brian Kelly. Kirby Smart is not that kind of polarizing, unless you just hate the Georgia Bulldogs the way that many SEC fans do, which is fine. I wonder if it's even an SEC coach, Lucas, and I would be fascinated to ask people covering Tennessee about this, who are around Josh Heupel and around that program, or does he want a seat at that table? Or does he just want to be a ball coach? Because I'm sure most of these dudes do, but it's a political role. These guys are as much politicians, as much used car salesmen, used Carl salesmen as they are coaches, but some of them just at their core want to be ball coaches.
Yeah, Heupel doesn't strike me as that guy.
He doesn't, but I don't want to discredit him just because he's publicly uninteresting or lacking opinion at press conferences. I know the man can work a room. He wouldn't have made it this far in college football if he couldn't.
But there's no question there is a massive vacuum with not just Saban out, but Jim Harbaugh out as well. So it's not just an SEC discussion. It is a college football discussion. You say, okay, Dabo Swinney.
No.
There's nobody more behind right now in what's happening in college football than Dabo Swinney.
Lucas, the reality of the situation is it's Kirby and Dion.
Sure.
Whether you want it to be, whether
in terms of audience,
whether it should be or not, Dion has the loudest voice of any of them, including Kirby Smart, which is a fascinating power dynamic in just college sports, not just college football. Anyway, you have NFL headlines for me? What are we going to talk about?
Find out next.
Ooh. So many people trust Two Rivers Ford. Football players, working moms, business owners. Why? Because Two Rivers Ford has been doing business with integrity for decades. Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. Welcome back. We've got some NFL headlines to get to. Titans on the practice field, as a matter of fact, for their second day of OTA work in week 2. Today is open to media, so you can expect some practice field footage. In, I don't know, about a half hour? I'm going to scurry on out of here at, what did we agree on, Lucas? 12:12?
Believe so.
Thereabouts. I'll turn it over to the competency of not Lucas Panzica and Jackson Williams, but Dr. Kevin Dyson.
Yes.
Will grace the show. And that will be what you do or you listen to until Brian Callahan speaks, scheduled for 12:45. But we've not been very punctual of late at the podium. So we will see whether that is available to you here with us or on with Brad and Blaine after us from 1 to 3. Meanwhile, you have some headlines?
I have some headlines. Oh, we need some imaging for this.
You have terrible news?
I don't. I'm going to do it for now. The news of the week. Nico Collins.
What is he doing lately with the Mickey Mouse impression and just these weird things that he's doing in front of
That was like a that was like a CNN newsflash sounder thing. Nico Collins, 3-year, $72.75.
Did you mean to do like dun 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 dun?
Yes.
That's not what you did.
You got it. We already talked about the Nico Collins deal. So in Cincinnati, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have not been present at OTAs. Head coach Zach Taylor said, quote, "They're working hard elsewhere and they'll be back at the right times. Should there be concern in Cincinnati about Jamar Chase, who is looking for a new contract, or T. Higgins, who was franchise tagged this offseason, but has formally requested a trade and has not signed his tender?"
No. I wouldn't sweat it. I mean, what is Higgins' leverage? Truly. Play football for them or don't play football at all. That's kind of his situation. And it may be untenable, but once the games start, he's going to get over it, and he's going to want to get his numbers up, and he's going to want to get paid on the other side of it. And even though I don't want to say that he's unhappy, but he's clearly messaging that he would like a more tenable situation. As he sees it, he does not have anything to really spur this on. And at every turn, the Bengals have been like, no, we're a better football team with T. Higgins. We're chilling. They're not, it doesn't sound like they're going to Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown this thing. Chase, you're going to pay him. It's just a matter of when. And I remind you again that this time of year is voluntary. So, like, for example, I have yet to see Nicholas Petit-Frere at an OTA practice. You know why? Because there's only been one open OTA practice for Nicholas Petit-Frere. NPF has been doing stuff at the facility. He's just not out there physically on the practice field. So when you see attendance later today, and maybe NPF's out there, maybe he's not. I don't know. I'll be able to tell you in about an hour. Does it mean that he's not there with the team doing stuff? Does it mean that he's not doing stuff at all? No, I don't think it's that deep. I think that it's an easy headline with two very famous players on a team that is probably a Super Bowl contender if they're both right.
In Los Angeles, Stetson Bennett is back. He's at OTAs, and he met with the media for the first time since September. Remember, we did this last season. It was, where is Stetson Bennett?
Because you didn't know about this. I feel like I came in here and told you, like, my friend, one of my college roommates lives in Los Angeles. Like, you need to figure out what the hell's going on with Stetson Bennett. I was like, I don't know what's going on with Stetson Bennett.
Sean McVay was saying, we haven't really heard from him. Not sure what's going on. But Stetson Bennett is back at OTAs, and he confirmed that the absence fell under, quote, the umbrella of mental health. And that's all he really wanted to say about it. He's back. He's focused on football. So hope everything is okay with Stetson Bennett. And he is back in L.A. after kind of a mysterious disappearance last season.
There's going to be, and I haven't seen the coverage of it yet, there's going to be a discussion around mental health, right? There's always a discussion. When you are offering that as a part of it, as a part of your excuse or your explanation, however you want to qualify it, it's gonna start getting parsed. Like, are athletes or people just hiding behind the shield of, well, I'm doing something for my mental health? I'm not interested in doing that. I'm gonna take him at his word. It's a lot of strain. He was playing a lot of football. I know people are going to shrug their shoulders and be like, oh, he's playing a lot of football. That must be so hard winning national championships. Yeah, it's really hard to do what it is that Stetson Bennett just did. So I'm not going to discount it. I'm not going to dismiss it, even though I think the situation's kind of wonky and there's probably more information there that I would like to know, which is why he's just using blanket statement mental health, it's not going to be me that does the think piece about whether he's hiding behind the mental health thing or not. Not interested.
The Minnesota Vikings have re-signed guard Dalton Reisner on a one-year deal, bringing him back with some added edge to that offensive line in front of potentially J.J. McCarthy this season. But the more interesting one-year deal signing, the New York Jets have signed Tariq Cohen on a one-year deal. Tariq Cohen, who has not taken a snap in the NFL since 2020, who was on the Carolina Panthers practice squad for a stretch last season and did not play. And the reasoning from head coach Robert Saleh is they expect kick returners to touch the ball over 100 times this season due to the new kickoff rules, which is why they signed Tariq Cohen. He will compete with Xavier Gipson for that role. That's one of those names that football fans will just be like, oh, yeah, I remember Tariq Cohen. Had a little moment in the sun there with the Chicago Bears, but you wonder how many guys will get those second chance opportunities because of the new kickoff rules and how many kind of unconventional methods we see teams utilize, which is why I didn't totally dismiss the Justin Fields thing. When I first saw it, I was like, okay,
Lucas.
I don't know. It's like a line of scrimmage, basically. He's your backup quarterback. You're not using him. I don't know. I'm not going to just outright dismiss it.
That's wild.
Until Justin Fields dismissed it. I'm just saying I think we're going to see some unconventional approaches to the new kickoff rule.
Oh, no, I
like
agree.
bringing back Tariq Cohen, who probably would not sniff an NFL roster if not for this rule change.
It's more a football play now than it's been since they started to legislate it out of relevancy. So I'm for it. And again, if it provides additional job opportunities, because he, like you said, he had, if I remember the Tariq Cohen injury, it was pretty wretched. I think it was an ACL, MCL, and a leg fracture, all in the same injury. It was really, really gruesome.
He's only 28.
Right. So like a 28-year-old 4 years ago has been out of work. He'd been out of work for 4 years. Can you imagine being out of work at 24 looking around with this, I don't want to say life-altering injury, but if it is directly impacting your profession, it has the ability to be life-altering. The Jets are probably going to, Jets are easy targets. So anytime the Jets do anything like this, they're going to be like, oh, look at them putting together the all-IR team again with Tariq Cohen from 2020. But still, I don't fault them.
It was brutal because he signed a 3-year extension worth over $17 million in September of 2020. In week 3, it was on a fair catch and he got knocked into. And so it was a torn ACL and MCL as well as a tibial plateau fracture.
Yeah.
So he's put on IR. And then after he recovers, he suffers a torn Achilles during a training session. So he's been through the ringer and he gets another opportunity in New York.
There are changes to the emergency quarterback rule, and you need to know because you've got 3 quarterbacks and one of them is trying to make the roster. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It is 12:01. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone studios. OTAs continue today from Ascension St. Thomas Sports Park. The Titans on the practice field. Head coach Brian Callahan scheduled to meet with media at 12:45. You can hear that presser live right here on The Zone. In Houston, the Texans and wide receiver Nico Collins have agreed to a 3-year extension worth over $72 million, $52 million in guaranteed money. Collins coming off a career year, catching 80 passes for over 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns last season. The Nashville Predators have hired a new director of goaltending, or an old director of goaltending, in Mitch Korn, who spent several years in that role under Barry Trotz, both in Nashville and Washington, and with the New York Islanders. Tonight in the NHL, the Oilers hosting the Dallas Stars. That is Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals. Dallas leads the series 2-1. Puck drop at 7:30. And tonight, Nashville Soccer Club is at FC Cincinnati for an Eastern Conference rivalry matchup. Pre-game coverage on The Zone is at 6, kickoff at 6:30. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Titans are on the practice field. I'm going to head out to St. Thomas Sports Park here in a little bit. You'll hear from your head coach at some point in the next hour, one would assume. 615-737-1045. That's how you jump in with us. And you can interact. You can live stream the show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Throw a like on YouTube if you're so inclined. We appreciate you. Kevin Dyson going to be here in just a little bit. Him and Lucas will chop it up. You brought up an interesting parallel between Dyson and Burks that I think people are going to be engaged with when I'm at practice. You want to preview that conversation for the audience?
Yeah, and Dyson and I have talked about this a little bit on Titans Talkback last season, but...
Which is coming back with the two of you, yes?
I believe so. Kevin Dyson did not... His breakout year, so to speak, his career year that he had after being a first-round draft pick at wide receiver was in year 4 of his career in 2001. 825 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, career numbers across the board. And he was coming off an injury-riddled 2000 season where he only played in 2 games, had 100 yards receiving. So, I don't know, some interesting parallels there in the pressure that comes with being a first-round pick that has not been available or consistently productive at the early onset. Obviously, Dyson found a ton of success in that season. Burks is trying to do the same. So just kind of trying to figure out the type of stuff Treylon Burks is going through in that regard heading into 2024.
So that will be in about 15 minutes from now. Meanwhile, we didn't talk about the changes to the emergency quarterback rule. So last year, famously, and this team is a particularly good case test or case study for the emergency quarterback rule, they allowed teams to have an emergency quarterback dressed on the roster that would not count against your game day roster after you pared it down from 53 to 48. The caveat is that the emergency quarterback has to be or had to be on your active roster for him to be the emergency quarterback, i.e. Levis and Willis both being on the Titans 53 last year, and that it must be because of injury or ejection for both of the starting quarterbacks for the third quarterback to see the field. It could not be you could not bench 2 quarterbacks and then go to your emergency quarterback in that situation. Injury or ejection are the only reasons that the emergency quarterback would be utilized to try and avoid what Christian McCaffrey was dealing with during the playoffs a couple of years ago, where Brock Purdy's elbow explodes, where Josh Johnson gets hurt, and all of a sudden McCaffrey's having to take snaps at QB. Malik Willis and Will Levis in some form or fashion were the beneficiary of this rule because Levis was the emergency QB for the first 6 weeks. Willis was not the emergency QB very often because after Tannehill came back, of course, he was healthy, and then that relegated Malik to the emergency quarterback role. But while Tannehill was unavailable, Willis was again the backup. Levis just leapfrogged him in the middle of all that. Now they've changed the rule to where you can elevate the emergency quarterback from the practice squad, which makes it less viable to keep a Malik Willis on the active roster. We talked about this at some point. I don't know if it was last week with OTAs. I don't know if it was the week before, about my level of interest in two of the most to date, and I don't mean this unkindly, but two of the most irrelevant players currently on the roster in Malik Willis and Caleb Farley as far as their contributions. What's Caleb Farley competing for right now? At best, CB 4 or 5.
A roster spot is the answer.
A roster spot, yes. Because he's in a contract year. They obviously declined his fifth-year option. He did not play a snap of football last year. He was on PUP, physically unable to perform all of last year, dealing with ramifications from his back.
Did he practice a snap last year?
At the very, very end, the late stages, I think that he was still on PUP, but available to be out there and start to condition and get back into shape while still being on physically unable to perform. Who has the less viable path moving forward? Because I'm looking at the cornerback room, 1 through 4, as far as I know, is settled. Snead, Uzier, McCreary, and then Jarvis Brownlee Jr., the 5th-round draft pick out of Louisville this year. Caleb Farley is at best competing for a roster spot or CB5, however you want to look at it. Unless they're really going to consider a positional move or they're going to try a couple of different things with him where he's a bit of a hybrid. I don't know what they're going to do with Caleb Farley. I'm very curious. Brian Callahan was very complimentary of him when we spoke with him about Farley last week. Said not a lot of people, I'm paraphrasing, but not a lot of people would have been able to bounce back from not just the professional tragedy, but of course Caleb Farley's father died tragically I think it was August of last year, towards the end of training camp, with that natural gas leak in their home in North Carolina that exploded, and unfortunately his father passed away, and this after losing his mother to breast cancer in 2018, and everything that happened with his college career and COVID. It's just been nightmare after nightmare for Caleb Farley. And I still feel like he has a more viable path to an active roster spot than Malik Willis does this year. Because I just look at Mason Rudolph. It's one OTA practice that we've been able to see, and I still see a clear and obvious difference between Mason Rudolph and Malik Willis and what they're asking them to do just in 7-on-7 stuff.
But yeah, Mason Rudolph is a relatively accomplished NFL backup quarterback.
I know.
Right? But why is that? That shouldn't be surprising to you.
It should be, because Malik should be, if this thing is going to be viable, then Malik should be able to compete more as that same kind of thing. Malik Willis has been in NFL games. He has started NFL games. The in-game experience, and again, what happened in London, I'm not pinning on Malik, but we had this conversation earlier about players. What are explanations and what are excuses for a player's lack of performance, contribution, general productivity? At what point do you just consider the player to not be good enough? I'm not saying that they have to make that determination on May the 29th. I'm not advocating for that at all, but their roster math this year is going to be interesting to me because I don't know what the numbers are going to be like at wide receiver. I'm expecting more. I don't know that it guarantees anything on the initial 53. Maybe I'm already thinking too much about the initial 53, but I think their offensive line situation is curious to see how many UDFA guys, is anybody on the roster potentially in danger of losing a roster spot? Is Daniel Brunskill a lock to make this roster in 2024? I think so.
Probably.
I would think so, but I don't know so. And they won't figure that even remotely out until training camp when they can put pads on. But between the two of them, do you find that Malik has a more viable path forward here than does Caleb Farley? Because I really have a hard time with it, Lucas, with the change to the emergency quarterback rule.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. Previously, with the emergency QB rule, you did not have to dedicate a roster spot to a third quarterback, right? But you could just...
On game day.
Right, on game day. But that quarterback could be there and dressed out and only could be used if the first two were injured.
Correct, but he has to be on your active roster.
Okay, so he was part of the 53 on game day.
Yeah, well,
The
it's not
emergency
53,
QB.
but it's 48.
Okay, right. So...
No, to your point, that it was like a ghost. If you chose to use the emergency quarterback situation, he didn't count.
Right, he didn't count.
He did not count.
Okay, gotcha. So I don't know. Is he affected?
Nor will he still count.
Is he affected? Does he benefit at all from the fact that he can just stay on the practice squad? Or does it change anything? Because to me, it doesn't really change anything. Malik Willis could be on the practice squad, and if the prior rule is in effect...
No. I'm talking about who has the more viable path forward to an active roster spot. If he gets cut, I would be curious to see what the waiver claim order would be.
The answer,
I truly don't know.
The answer to your question is Willis, or excuse me, is Farley is the more viable path to a roster spot,
Which is crazy.
Right? It is. That's
he
the
did
answer.
Not play a snap of football.
Sure. But it's.
I sat there looking at stuff like that this morning because I was just going through some stuff, getting ready for another day of OTAs. I have some questions about Malik for Brian Callahan because we really haven't talked to Callahan about Malik. It's been more about Mason Rudolph than it has Malik.
It's like, are you even developing Malik Willis to be your backup of the future? Because Mason Rudolph is 28 years old. Like he's my age, right? Mason Rudolph might have a 10-year career in front of him as an NFL backup from here on out.
Sure.
And with Caleb Farley, then you're talking about even the potential of having some cornerback depth for a guy that has all of the tools and traits. And we say it all the time, you can't have too many corners. So just looking at those two positions with a young second-year quarterback as your starter, a young 28-year-old backup quarterback as your number two, you're talking about disaster having to strike before Malik Willis gets called up. Whereas for Caleb Farley, it falls under the Burks thing, right? It's house money. If you get anything from Farley, then you've got one of, if not the deepest cornerback rooms in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
But it's different with Willis, with what's in front of him. And you just don't need, it's always weird to say, but you don't need quarterback depth in that way, right? It's the most important position in sports. But like, how many teams have a 1 and a 2 and a 3 that they can really count on that could go win them a game at any given moment?
Steelers kind of did for a while there with Rudolph,
Dobbs.
with Dobbs. They had Hodges. Teams have done the 3 quarterback thing. And again, we're not at 18 games yet, but at a certain point, it will become more viable than it ever has. Do we have news?
We have news. Eric Crawford, a sports journalist for WDRB, reports all charges against PGA golfer Scotty Scheffler have been dismissed.
Oh, yeah.
Scotty Scheffler is a free man. No prison for the world's number one golfer. No jail time for the alleged assault of a police officer.
I honest to God thought you were going to do something with the Trump trial because I just got an update on my phone about the Trump trial.
No, the Scotty Scheffler trial.
Oh, okay. One infinitely more important than the other.
Yes, Jefferson County prosecutors have dropped all charges.
Well, that's good because that video was ridiculous.
It was so ridiculous.
And like Scotty Scheffler even admitted, like, yes, I could have slowed down or done something. Like Scotty Scheffler has been nothing but contrite in this situation.
Car was moving like 5 miles an hour.
Oh, God. Well, I'm glad that's settled.
The fact that he kept his
Free
cool.
Scotty.
The fact that he kept his cool throughout that whole thing.
The fact that he was like 4 or 5 under, wasn't he? He was great on Saturday. Or on Fridays.
Man is unshakable. But yes, Scotty Scheffler is a free man.
Okay, well, that's good. I'm off to practice. Kevin Dyson next.
Titans are on the practice field. OTAs in progress. Head coach Brian Callahan scheduled to meet with the media coming up at 12:45. So stay with us and we'll carry that for you. But in the meantime, we bring back Dr. Kevin Dyson. You can find him as the principal at Centennial High School. Of course, hear him on Titans Talk Back during the Titans season post-game here on 104.5 The Zone. And KD, it's great to talk to you, man. Haven't heard from you in quite some time.
Been a hiatus, man. Hadn't talked Titan football since, since January.
It feels like a lot has happened since January, that's for sure. A lot to catch up on here, KD. I mean, let's just start with the schedule, for example. We plan on hearing you after every one of these games. So have you gotten a chance to sit down since the Titan schedule came out a couple weeks ago and really parse through it? And what has stuck out to you the most?
I think it's like anything else in the NFL. You got to look at the moves and off-season draft picks, because I think a lot of times we get enamored with what happened years previous and assume it's going to be, this game's going to be tough, that game's going to be easy. But you got to look at the moves, matchups, all those type of things. I think I like the home schedule, obviously. I think you got some good home cooking games that we can have opportunity to win. But at the end of the day, this is a whole new Titans team. And what I mean by that is new coaching staff, new personnel. It don't matter who's on that schedule. We still don't know what the product is until they get on the field to even make, in my opinion, a true assessment of what they are going to do as far as the 24 schedule looks like.
Well, that's a good point, KD, because you look at a few of these games, and the thing that sticks out is, okay, rookie quarterback, right? When you play Caleb Williams and you play the Patriots with Drake May and the Vikings potentially with J.J. McCarthy, Washington with Jaden Daniels. But apart from all of those teams that are going to have a new QB in place, I think you're right in that we look at the Dolphins game, Monday Night Football at Hard Rock Stadium, and just think that's going to be the same teams going against each other on Monday Night Football like it was last season, where both of those teams could look incredibly different from that point to the September 30th Monday Night Football game, especially the Titans, who are a completely different football team. And I wonder what the conversation is on the other side of the schedule for teams that see the Titans on their schedule. And I wonder if it even registers all the moves the Titans have made this season in bringing in Calvin Ridley and the coaching change, or if they look at that and say, we're playing the 6-11 Titans from 2023.
Exactly. I mean, and people are going to make assumptions about the teams like the Bears, right? No, that should be a win for the Titans. Now, granted, they made some change and go back with a rookie quarterback, and I'm referencing the Bears. We just don't know how that's going to translate. We saw what Houston did with a rookie quarterback and how that worked out for them last year. He was very highly successful. So, it's just you never know how the schedule's going to pan out. And I look at games like the Bills, of course, in your rival games with the Colts. And I think the intriguing part about Jacksonville is the Ridley move. And so there's a few games in there. Lions, there's another team. You forget they're on the schedule. Of course, the Packers, another playoff team from the year before. So you can look at their schedule and say, oh, man, that's a rough schedule. But I think with the offseason moves, new coaching staff, it's hard to predict, if you will, how successful or unsuccessful the Titans will be. I think, like most, there's an excitement with this team. I think with a new head coach, the Rand kind of taking the reins, and he's made some moves, whether it be via the draft, free agency, that has a lot of people excited about the potential for the year, but you still got to put the product on the field, right? So I'm excited about the potential of this team and some of the moves they had and some of the key pieces that they were able to keep together, some of the core guys, to see how they put this thing together and get ready for the season.
Dr. Kevin Dyson with us on 104.5 The Zone. So before we talk about some of those moves, KD, especially at the position that you played at wide receiver, I do want to get your perspective on this report from yesterday that we've talked about but have not gotten a former player perspective on, and that is that the NFL Players Association is working to finalize a proposal to overhaul the offseason starting as soon as next year, which would mean eliminating voluntary on-field work in the spring in favor of a longer training camp ramp-up with players reporting in mid-June to early July. So in so many words, taking OTAs and pushing them into the middle of the summer and essentially having an elongated training camp period. So players report and then they're there, and the season essentially starts from there, and they're off in the month of April and May as opposed to June and July. As a former player, how do you think you would have received this report and this proposal?
Again, I guess at this point in the game, I'm old. I'm an old guy. My thing is training, like most things, is progressive. And so you want to be at your optimum by the time you get to training camp, and then you work on some things in training camp, condition your body for the long season ahead. I think if you talk about players' health, I think that's part of this conversation. But we have seen an increase in injuries with the elimination of some of the contact and some of the practice length and time that the players can have. I think you've seen somewhat of an increase in the muscle tissue type injuries and things of that nature, right? I personally, since you're asking me, I like the progressive off season where I had like an OTA mini camp, a competitive mini camp, had a break, because that season's long. So once you get into that season, you got a bye week, but you really don't have no downtime, especially if you got injuries and things of that nature. So that summertime is your me time. So if you eliminate that or push it back, I can see some benefits to that as far as being able to have some time for a 2-month stint. But at the same time, it's a long haul season. And essentially, you're making it longer by pushing it back a month and some change for the players. So my preference would be, somewhere probably in the middle where you have some involuntary and maybe in some mandatory competitive sessions that kind of get your feet wet, because most of those evaluations and those OTAs are for some of the younger guys, maybe the bottom end of your roster, the guys that just got drafted. You want to see what you got and see how they handle the playbook, the terminology, the pressure, all those different things. I think that is an important evaluation process not just from a player standpoint, but also from a management standpoint. So, but again, I say that I think I started this whole statement by saying I'm old, so I tend to think on that side of it, and I would want to keep the progressive conditioning, if you will, of my body to get ready for the season.
Well, and as you got deeper into your career, how did you find yourself handling OTAs in terms of what you were able to accomplish or what your goal was going in? Like, for example, how do you think DeAndre Hopkins would be approaching OTAs, having done it time and time and time again, along with Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd, as opposed to a Treylon Burks who comes in with going into his third season and obviously a lot on his shoulders in terms of living up to that first-round billing? How did you handle that as a rookie versus as a vet?
Man, it doesn't matter whether you're a rookie or a vet. When you put on that field and you put that film in the eye in the sky is what we called it, you're putting a product on the field. So you always want to be competitive and give your best. And it's about getting better, right? And it's again, like I said, it's progressive as far as where you want to be when you get to the season. And so you're working out some things. You might be working on a release. You want to see how explosive you go. Or you've gotten, you've worked on these routes or what have you. Your timing with the quarterback, all the different things that you get to work on in these times. And you may, as a veteran, if you will, you might not get the quantity of reps that, say, a Treylon Burke is in this stage of his career, or Phillips, or some of the younger guys. They're going to get the bulk of the reps, but you're going to make sure the reps you do get are quality, and you're going to try to be competitive. You're going to try to make plays, tough catches, get the feel for traffic, being in zones, having contact, guys wrapped around you, making tough catches. You want to, as far as receivers, you want to get conditional for that kind of stuff. People don't realize that so much of what football is rhythmic, and having a rhythm, especially from a receiver standpoint, being able to, and a quarterback, being able to find pockets in the zone, being able to feel that tight coverage and know how to position my body to make a tight catch, things of that nature that you condition yourself. There's muscle memory is involved, but in part, a lot of that is part of that off-season training. And so for me, even as a veteran, I didn't want to take, 400 reps in an OTA, but I did want to get some quality reps and compete.
Dr. Kevin Dyson, our guest on 104.5 The Zone. And I especially think back to that transition year, KD, from 1999 to 2000, when Jeff Fisher obviously is the head coach, but you guys are making that transition from Les Steckel to Mike Heimerdinger. And obviously it's changes from top to bottom with the Titans organization, at least with the coaching staff. but still a new offense being implemented, and Will Levis carries over with that systemic change. So how much can be accomplished at this time of year just between quarterbacks and receivers to establish that, what you're talking about, but in a completely new offense with new terminology?
Yeah, that remains to be seen as far as the nuances and the adjustments he makes offensively. Like when Heimerdinger came in for Steckel, he adjusted to us. We had just come off a Super Bowl run. He had some stuff that I felt was beneficial, enhanced some of the things we did. He put more onus on route running ability and us making catches. His words exactly were, you get paid to make plays too. And he's exactly what he said. So that was his excitement from that standpoint. So that OTA was super competitive. For receivers, we wanted to prove a point as well. And so, yeah, I think there is a level of you want to show the new coach your ability. You want to show that you are worthy of whatever distinction that you have. You want the ball. You want the rock. He also got to see what he has. And he's coming in. I don't know if he's completely, like I said, with Heimerdinger, he came in and he kind of adjusted to us. He kept very much of the terminology the same familiarity because he had a veteran team, and he adjusted to us. And that was kind of he was a savant in that, in the sense that he easily picked up stuff very quickly, and he adjusted, and we just changed a couple aspects of some of the routes we did. He added a couple things here and there, some side adjustments he took side adjustments away and put the onus back on the quarterback. So he brought some things from his Shanahan tree that seemed to enhance what we did specifically in a passing game, and it seemed to work. Now, I don't know if Callahan is doing the same thing, or if he's completely just scrapped everything and said, this is our playbook, here's the terminology, learn it, which NFL more often than not, the difference is the philosophy of the play caller and the terminology of the play caller. Everything else is football. You're going to run a slant and a flat. You're going to run a curl and a flat. You're going to run a post and a dig. You're going to run 2 comebacks. You're going to run 4 verticals. You're going to do all the things. Everybody's doing it. Now you have some little nuances in between all that. If that's a matter of game planning. But more often than not, offenses are very similar in the National Football League. There's little nuances that coaches bring from their skill, from their background. But ultimately, it becomes the terminology and how fast the guys can pick up your terminology. And then a philosophy. Are we a vertical team first? Are we a mid-range team first? Are we quick game that builds on the vertical game? Are we a run-first type team? Are we a spread-out team? Are we running 3 wide receiver sets 75% of the time or only 35% of the time? So it's just a matter of the philosophy of that play calling.
And I don't know that anybody will be more familiar with that philosophy and terminology than Tyler Boyd when it comes to Brian Callahan's offense, coming over to join this wide receiver room. KD, when you saw this news of the acquisition of Tyler Boyd, did it change anything about how you believe the Titans will utilize Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins?
Not necessarily. I think Boyd, one thing you can say about him and his stint at Cincinnati was he was a good complementary receiver. Very quality route runner. He played his role. He made big plays in big moments when his number was called because of the attention that was placed on the other 2 big receivers they had. And I kind of see him saying that well. It's, head coaches, coordinators, they have guys that they trust, that they kind of bring them where they go. I can think of guys that have done that even from my era where they seem to follow that coach around because there's a trust level. And I think that's similar with Callahan with Boyd. There's a level of trust, a guy he can put in that locker room for whatever terminology, whatever nuances he wants to bring to the Titans organization as a play caller, where this man Boyd can now come in and say, this is what coach is talking about. Here's how we used to do it. Here's how we adjust. Here's the break off of this route. Here's the combination. Here's the communication. Here's the adjustment. Here's the side adjustment. Here's the play check. Here's all the different things that, because he's been in the system for a number of years, where he could be kind of that coach, if you will, in that meeting room to help the receivers coach get everybody on the same page. And I think it's exciting for a guy like Boyd, fresh start, if you will, coming to a system he's very familiar with. He's had a big impact as that number 3 guy in the National Football League, and now he can go out here and make a name for himself and potentially get him a bigger contract as well.
And then naturally, Dyson, we just look at what that means for Treylon Burks. And we've talked about this, you and I, on Titans Talk Back. Maybe a similar parallel in that you made a big jump after an injury-riddled year 3 of your career, and you made a big jump in year 4, the most productive year of your NFL career with the Titans. So here's Treylon Burks. Obviously, injuries have plagued him, and he's going into year 3, not year 4, but similar pressures, right, of being a first-round draft pick at the wide receiver position. So in a strange way, do you feel like this situation and what's in front of him almost takes the pressure off in a way going into 2024 with Ridley and Hopkins and Boyd all in the mix and not as much weight on his shoulders? Just could you kind of contextualize what the offseason is like for Treylon Burks having been in similar shoes?
Actually, I think it's a little bit more pressure. Obviously, he's a former first-round pick. Eyes are on him. The assumption is you got Hopkins and Ridley going to be a starter and Boyd's going to be year 3, right? You assume based on the money spent and guys being brought in. So to me, the eyes are on him from a different standpoint. So I actually think there's a little bit more pressure in that he has to build a name, right? Because he doesn't know his fate, right? Because we all do it. Every player will tell you they do it. You locker room you locker count. You try to see, well, if we only keep 6 receivers, I make this much money. He's a free agent. All those different things, all the doubts are coming to his mindset. And so I would argue that he's feeling more pressure in the sense that he doesn't know where he stands with the organization based on the moves they have made here in the last several months. And so with that being said, I think he's going to go in this offseason. And I would assume he has to go in this offseason like I'm auditioning, whether it be for the Titans or the other 31 teams in the National Football League. This is an audition. So he has to get his mind right and prepared and perform at a level where he has value, whether it be I get released and I need to get a job, I get traded, or if the Titans have plans for me to be in that rotation. So he's got a lot on his plate, on his mind, I am sure. I'm sure him and his agent have had conversations, whether it be with Red or with other organizations. I know between each other they've had these conversations. And so it remains to be seen. I think we'll see how he handles it going into the first preseason game. I'm assuming he's probably going to be with that second group. Again, I'm just making that assumption based on the moves and what I'm hearing coming out of the OTAs and things of that nature, that he's going to be with that second group of receivers. And so he's got to basically go out there and perform and show his value not only to the Titans organization, but anybody that's watching film.
Kevin Dyson, our guest on 104.5 The Zone. I know you're working, KD, but school's out, right? Like, when does Kevin Dyson get to be in summer mode to take that mid-year break before things crank up, both in school and in football?
Unfortunately, principals, we pretty much here all the time, man. And, I'm on my lunch break right now, so I was fortunate to get the call. But, schools don't slow down. People move and they register, they show up. You got to prepare for the next year. So it's an interesting dynamic. But, of course, I take my time when I can and try to get some golf trips here and there. And that kind of helps you recharge. Just like anything else, like we're talking about OTAs, man, you got to have some kind of break so you can recharge and build that excitement back for the next year. It's not different as being a competitor and being competitive in what you do. It's the same thing. You get to the end of a season and you're tired and you need a break, and then you use off season to recharge and get better. So that same approach I've been taking for the last 20-something years of my life.
No matter the field you're in, KD, appreciate you spending your lunch break with us. As always, look forward to catching up soon.
Absolutely, man. Take care. I'll see you soon.
Yes, sir. Dr. Kevin Dyson with us on 104.5 The Zone, at KTDyson87 on Twitter. Looking forward to having him back on Titans Talk Back for the upcoming season post-game here on The Zone. Head coach Brian Callahan getting ready to meet with the media out at Titans OTAs. We will carry that presser for you live coming up next. Titans head coach Brian Callahan scheduled to be meeting with the media here in a few moments. You will hear that live here on The Zone, whether that's with us in the next couple minutes or with B-Hop and Blaine coming up next from 1 to 3. Welcome back. I'm Lucas Panzica. This is the Buck Rising Show. Buck off at the practice field at Ascension St. Thomas Sports Park as the team comes off the practice field. Jackson Williams is our producer. Interesting stuff from Kevin Dyson, who just joined us in the last segment. Catch it on the podcast if you missed it. But just the idea of Treylon Burks facing more pressure in 2024 than he even would be if he was confident that he was going to be relied upon within the offense. Because you can't say that right now, right? Especially when you look at Brian Callahan and those offenses in Cincinnati with Zach Taylor calling the plays. Those reps revolved around Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. They didn't get all that deep into the depth chart in terms of throwing to other receivers, unless, of course, T. Higgins wasn't on the field. Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd have been pretty available over the years. But apart from an injury situation, those three, that core of three receivers, hardly left the field for Cincinnati. And if that carries over here, then it's a different type of pressure that Dyson was talking about, where not only do you still need to prove yourself up to that first-round pick billing as a wide receiver in this league, but now the opportunities may be even lesser to be able to do so. So an interesting concept, as opposed to knowing you are going to have the chances in abundance, and maybe that being the thing that takes the pressure off. It'll be interesting to see how Treylon Burks fits in that regard, and maybe we hear from Brian Callahan on that. Because, Jackson, I do feel like, having never set foot on a football field beyond, early years of high school, unlike you, grizzled veteran at DCA as an offensive lineman, I do feel like that makes sense. And talking to guys like Brad Hopkins and Blaine and Kevin Dyson, that they seem to agree that the quarterback wide receiver tandem, especially with new faces and a new offense, stand to benefit the most from a period like OTAs, when it is just about rhythm, right? And getting to know tendencies and things like that. Whereas offensive linemen can work on technique with Bertha and Olga all day, and that's great. And Bill Callahan knows what he's doing. But at the end of the day, there's got to be a pretty significant ceiling on what you can accomplish as an offensive lineman at OTAs when there's no pads and no live reps. So be interested to hear from Brian Callahan and maybe a couple of Titans players coming up in a few minutes. Coming up tonight, Nashville Soccer Club back in action. They are at FC Cincinnati. We have the call for you here on 104.5 The Zone. Will Bowling and myself, Jackson Williams, produces our soccer broadcast. 6 o'clock pregame, 6:30 kickoff as Nashville still working under interim manager Roomba Munthali and looking for their next manager to replace Gary Smith. Goes on the road to play a rival and takes on the hottest team in MLS, FC Cincinnati, on 7 straight wins, only 2 short of the MLS record, which is 9. That would tie Seattle from back in 2018. So rivalry matchup, always fun when Nashville and Cincy get together. Hope you'll join us for that later tonight. But as we await Brian Callahan, let's do some polls.
These are the polls, and they're brought to you by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. What is the dumbest thing in sports this week? Ashley says the cop that arrested Scotty Scheffler. Puka going with NASCAR, calling the race the way it did.
A lot of people were upset with NASCAR over the weekend. Ashley might win it, the cop that arrested Scotty Scheffler. If you missed it, all charges have been dropped against Scheffler, and our long national nightmare is over.
Who is the new face of SEC football? Puka going with Kirby, Karen going with Steve Sarkisian, Kenneth Sark, Luke. It's basically a race between Steve Sarkisian and Kirby Smart.
What does Steve Sarkisian have to do to take that title from Kirby Smart?
National title.
Would have to win a national championship, right? And he's got a great chance to do it this year with Quinn Ewers. What a statement that would be. Texas coming into the league and winning the SEC, winning a national title right off the bat. But yeah, right now it's Kirby Smart. I don't know how you could say differently.
How would you describe the Titans' current quarterback depth? 30% going great, 57% with and 13% saying not enough.
I don't know about not enough. I mean, quarterback depth. What is good quarterback depth in the NFL? Because to me, that's a quality starter and a backup that you feel can win you 1 to 2 games, right? Like, how many teams, Jackson, off the top of your head, we don't have to go through them all right now, but how many teams would you say have that? A quality starter and a backup that you feel very confident can come in and win 1 to 2 games?
I don't know. How many teams do you think?
I don't know. Half the league?
Yeah, like, it's a hard thing to really. I mean, Joe Flacco obviously had the Linsanity run, as I've been calling it, last year with the Browns. Like, you're not going to get that.
Well, the irony is the Titans, we feel probably more secure the Titans have part 2 of that equation than part 1, right? We don't know that Will Levis is a quality starter yet. He hasn't proven that yet. Mason Rudolph has proven he can come in and win you a couple games. He helped get the Steelers to the postseason last year. So maybe is the proper answer because of the question still around Will Levis.
All right. What is the least efficient food to eat? Chris saying a pineapple. Anthony going with crawfish. Tress going with strawberries, stem and all.
Oh, come on. Strawberries. That is one of the more efficient fruits to eat.
Straight to jail if you eat it with the stem.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. I know people that eat shrimp, shell and all. Ugh. That is straight to jail for me. Shrimp, and I love shrimp, are, for me, the most inefficient food to eat. And I know we were talking about this with Ramon in the morning. He said crawfish, which I get. There's a lot of work involved. Like, you get judged based on how you eat crawfish, but a crawfish bowl is a fun time where everybody's eating the potatoes and the corn, and that's part of the whole thing. But when you're sitting down at a restaurant and you get a plate of food and it's seafood pasta, which I adore, and there's a bunch of shrimp on top that you got to peel yourself, I think that's up there with one of the more inefficient foods.
Got to work for it. Which will be the next wide receiver to get paid? 69% going with Justin Jefferson, 19% with Brandon Ayuk, 10% with T. Higgins, and 2% saying other, but they didn't write in. Like
nobody wrote in. Yeah, Justin Jefferson is probably the candidate here. We probably should have included Jamar Chase in this poll as he is holding out of OTAs at the moment. But Justin Jefferson, we know, is in talks. He also has not shown up to voluntary stuff. And you figure either one of those former LSU receivers will reset the market. Are those the polls?
Those are the polls.
And that's the show. Brian Callahan will meet with the media. You can hear that live coming up next as Brad Hopkins and Blaine Bishop take it from 1 to 3 right here on 104.5 The Zone.